Same women who say we were not exploited, he just told us how to do TikTok. Also, in the prosecution file, if you want to talk about it, there's not a single bank transfer. There's not a single piece of evidence for any money. So I'm accused of making money from TikTok, but they haven't found any money. There's no money, and the victims are saying, I didn't exploit them to do TikTok. The whole thing is a joke.
What is, I think, problematic for you is the war room, which was a group
miscategorized and misunderstood.
It was called the war room.
Correct.
Okay. And it had a lot of people who were dubbed the generals who ran the war room.
Correct.
For you. And the war room had 500 to 600 members who paid, I think, $6,000+ to be a member of this. And when you saw the logs of the web chats between people from the war room to each other, a lot of it made disturbing reading. Were you disturbed by it when you read that?
Firstly, a lot of that is bullshit. A lot of that's fake. Secondly...
You think that literally those logs are fake?
Absolutely. Secondly...
But the BBC verified them.
The BBC verified them, or they're the same people who verified the vaccine. Those people, they're liars, firstly. A lot of them are fake. Secondly,
were you disturbed by anything you read?
No, because none of it's real, firstly. Secondly, there's 4,000 members in the war room. Thirdly, the war room is about masculine personal development. We talk about fitness, making money, strength. We talk about very important things. There's 4,000 members inside. If you're telling me that amongst 4,000 members with 24-hour chats 7 days a week for the last 5 years, they've managed to find 2 guys talking locker room talk, and that somehow offends the world, then nobody understands how the world works. That's not why I was in jail. It's nothing to do with the war room. I was in jail because I spoke against power, because I told the truth about COVID, because I told the truth about the war in Ukraine, because I told the truth about all of these things.
I don't understand why people would want to put you in jail for giving your opinions about COVID or Ukraine. Why would they?
Why wouldn't they?
Well, why would they? Why would they say that Andrew Tate's opinion is so important on Ukraine that we have to put him in jail? I don't buy that.
Okay, because I was the most Googled man on the planet, and I had a huge affinity with the most troublesome demographic for the Matrix, which is the young masculine youth, the people who you need to die in wars, the people who you need to psyop into being slaves to build the roads while telling them that they're not allowed a point of view and they're not allowed an opinion on anything. And I was saying things which was going against the narrative. And the Matrix, the way it operates is it uses the MSM to purport lies, to inject slave programming into people's brains so that we live lives which are not good for us but are good for them. And I was sitting there unplugging it. Why would they sit there and say, we've put together this massive psyop, we're going to convince everybody to inject themselves with poison, and we're going to lock everyone in their houses, and it's all a lie, and we're going to let this one guy who everyone listens to...
Andrew, it wasn't all a lie.
Yes, it was.
It wasn't. There was a new novel coronavirus. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what the facts were, and you can then laugh at them if you wish.
Sure.
But there was a novel coronavirus, COVID-19. It was killing thousands of people a day.
Really?
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
Scary.
Yeah, and I know people who died.
Who doesn't? I know people who died before Corona.
Fine, I'm sure people died of lots of things, but it was killing exponentially thousands and thousands of people, and then vaccines were developed at very high speed, and they managed to save, in my estimation, millions of lives. You may not agree with that,
absolutely,
but those are facts as assumed by the body of scientific and medical experts in the world.
The body of scientific and medical experts, you mean the Matrix? I could get...
What is the Matrix?
The Matrix are a bunch of people who can come up with studies from the sky to say anything they want them to say, so they can use the MSM to purport garbage inside of people's minds. So you end up locked in your house, clapping for the NHS like a performing seal, injecting yourself with experimental poison for the 9th time. It's a lie. There was no reason to lock everyone in their house. More people died from missed cancer appointments than anyone ever died of COVID. People always got the sniffles before COVID, and they've always got it since. Let me ask you a question.
Hang on, it wasn't...
Where has COVID gone?
It wasn't...
Diseases don't go away.
It wasn't...
Where's COVID gone?
It wasn't... Well, the COVID strains have got milder, as indeed flu did. Flu used to kill...
it's gone away now.
Well, flu pandemic in about 100 years ago killed 50 to 100 million people, and it's got steadily milder over the decades since. This is normal medical science pathway for most pandemics, right? So on that, I mean, your sort of cast iron, it was all Matrix, MSM nonsense, is palpably untrue.
Well, I'll tell you why that's not untrue. Let me tell you my personal experience with COVID. I'm an extremely logical person. At the beginning, when everyone was dying, dropping dead in the streets in China, which I never saw, by the way, funny, and the Italian hospitals were full, English hospitals were never full. Funny. Me and my brother sat there and said, if this disease is so deadly and can damage us as strong military-age males, then the world is over. So there's no point in hiding in our house. We decided to go to Sweden. On day one of COVID, day one when everyone still believed, we went to Sweden. Why does no one talk about the fact that Sweden was open the entire time? Why does no one talk about the fact they didn't have masks or lockdown or vaccines? My brother and I partied in nightclubs 7 days a week for 3 entire months while everyone in England was locked in their house.
Sweden actually had a number of restrictions.
Not when I was there. It was open.
Not as draconian as we had in the UK, and there are certainly legitimate questions to ask about the scale of our lockdowns. I think people panicked. They saw what was happening in Italy, which had the second best medical healthcare system in the world, and people were dying in massive numbers and the hospitals were overrun. So people may have panicked.
Did you hear about the guy who died in a motorcycle crash and it was a COVID death? Did you hear about that one?
Well, there was certain
Downing Street didn't seem very concerned with
there
COVID.
There was a long debate about people dying of COVID or with COVID. I know all that, but the bottom line for me, it is indisputable that COVID was a deadly pandemic that killed a lot of people. It turned out a lot of older people more than young people, but they didn't know that at the time, not for a long period. The vaccine saved millions of people's lives. There are legitimate questions about some of the boosters, about some of the side effects of the vaccines, as there are, by the way, with all vaccines. But the idea that COVID is some invention by the Matrix to suppress and control its people is for the birds, Andrew. It's for the birds.
It seems the birds and I are friends.
I don't think a smart guy like you actually believes that.
Of course I
And that's
absolutely
believe that. One of my problems I have with you is that I think you are intelligent, but I think you also adopt positions that you know are going to get the anti-Matrix mob inflamed. And it's just these all-encompassing views you have. COVID was a load of nonsense. Vaccines are all dangerous and killing more people than they say.
Never said that. I said the COVID vaccine.
Well, COVID vaccine, well, you don't think they worked?
No, of course not, because the idea of
course
vaccine,
they worked.
The word vaccine in and of itself is that you get...
They save millions of lives.
If you get a vaccine, you do not get the disease. They changed the definition of vaccine in the dictionary so they could continue to inject us with this pointless poison. I had the vaccine for polio. I've never had polio. You got the vaccine for COVID, and you're bragging online how you have COVID for the 8th time, but it's not that bad because you've had 6 injections. It's insane. And please understand my position. Please understand that I'm a person who doesn't believe any of these studies, don't believe any of this garbage, don't believe the Matrix. I'm a person who was in Sweden for 3 months as everyone was afraid, locked in their houses, partying at will. It was perfectly fine. They had a lower death rate than the UK.
They had a much higher death rate than their neighbouring countries in Scandinavia. Did you know that?
They had a lower death rate than the UK.
Did you know that?
It doesn't, no, I didn't know that.
It doesn't matter to you?
Of course not.
So you wouldn't compare them to their immediate neighbours. You'd only compare them to a country in the UK.
If you think lockdowns worked, Piers, if you think lockdowns...
I think lockdowns were only acceptable as an immediate panic move, which it was, before there were vaccines. The moment they had a successful vaccine program that worked, then there was no justification for further lockdowns.
You're a very important person, and you're very well respected.
I'm not important, I'm a journalist.
No, you're very important, and you're very well respected within the UK, and you've been famous for a very long time. Were you invited to the party at Downing Street, or were you not in that circle?
No.
No? Oh, that's a shame.
And I thought the behaviour...
Because they seemed very concerned about COVID on the TV,
and by the way,
they didn't seem to give a shit as soon as the TV was on.
I thought that was disgraceful. And I thought Boris Johnson and the people working at Number 10 who were having those parties, when I had friends of mine who were literally saying goodbye to their mothers on FaceTime on their phone because they weren't allowed in to see them. I knew people in care homes where it ripped through and killed a third of the people in the home in 2 weeks. And the desperation that people felt. I had a cousin who lost his father who couldn't go and see his dying wife and so on.
It's disgusting.
There were terrible stories.
It's criminal.
Terrible stories.
It's disgusting. So let me ask you a question as a professional, because we're both adults and we're both very smart. As a professional, which is more likely that the government believed COVID was deadly and everybody should be truthfully afraid and locked in their houses, but because they had this spirit inside of them and they couldn't resist the idea of a party, decided to risk their lives to party, or they lied on the television trying to scare everyone and enslave them and lock them in their houses, knowing it's garbage, knowing it's a lie, and not caring, and had a party behind everyone's backs so they didn't think they'd get caught? Which one is more likely as a professional, as a logical human?
Why don't we just agree that they were a bunch of rank hypocrites, stupid people, who were behaving utterly selfishly, to the extent that the Queen, when her husband, Prince Philip, dies, is in the church on her own, in a mass, with none of her family around her after losing a rock of 70 years. And it turned out the night before, Downing Street had, I think, 2 parties, including a karaoke party. I think that was shameful and disgraceful.
Well,
So we can agree on that,
We
right?
can agree on that, and we can wake up and start to realize, oh, maybe the government doesn't care about us. Maybe the government lies to us. Maybe they tell us things and try and scare us, but they don't actually care themselves. Maybe all they are is hypocritical, self-interested people.
Maybe they are.
Maybe they use the MSM to purport their lies, to keep everybody enslaved while they do whatever they want, and that is the matrix in and of itself. And if you speak against it and people listen to you, I'll repeat this. Your ability to speak freely is directly correlated to your insignificance. If you're as big as I was, the most Googled man on the planet telling the truth, you will pay the price, Piers. And that is why I was locked in that cell. And I do not regret it, because I live true to God. I'm not going to sit here as a coward and not tell the truth to people for as long as I live until they put a bullet in my head.
Let me ask you about the lover boy method. So the suggestion is that you and your brother and others, let's talk about you, that you deploy the lover boy method, where you would make women fall in love with you. You would then persuade them to do webcam stuff, right?
TikTok.
Okay, but wait, let's call it webcam stuff, right?
No, let's not call it that. The indictment is about TikTok.
Okay, what would you make the women do? Or what would they do with you?
I don't make anybody do anything.
Okay.
In fact, let's talk about the lover boy method. So it's very interesting. Let's imagine the Matrix is pissed off with a said individual who's telling too much truth and everybody is listening to him, and they decide they're going to attack him with sexual assault claims. They say, he's making women do, well, we found conversations where he gave advice on how to go viral on TikTok. He's making women do TikTok, but he isn't being horrible to them. He's not hitting them. He's not being mean to them. So what can we do? Let's use the lover boy method. If I was abusive and mean, they wouldn't say lover boy method. You know what lover boy method means? Being nice. He was nice and polite and kind, and they really liked him as a person, and he told them how to do TikTok.
But that's not what the
He's
lover boy...
a lover boy. Of course it is.
Andrew, that's not what the lover boy method is.
Absolutely it is.
The lover boy method is where perpetrators woo victims with the prospect of a loving relationship until they can be forced into abusive situations or a form of slavery.
This is garbage.
That's actually what it means.
The lover boy method is being nice to people so that you work together, effectively what they're trying to say here. I was nice to girls who asked me for TikTok advice, and they sang us the lover boy method. I didn't beat them into doing TikTok. I didn't force them. I didn't threaten them. In fact, I was like, yeah, you're very pretty. You can be pretty famous.
Was there any element of coercion?
How can there be an element? What does that even mean? Let's be professionals here. What does that even mean?
What do you think coercion means?
I was coerced into this interview. You came along to me and said...
You weren't coerced into this interview.
Yes, I was.
Or don't tell me, the bullying
Piers.
MSM said, Andrew, you've got to do an interview.
No.
And I'm going to fly all the way to Romania to do it.
You didn't do that. You used the lover boy method. You said, sir...
The lover boy method?
Yep. Andrew, this is going to be a very interesting interview. We had a good one last time. You're a nice guy. We have some interesting conversations.
I didn't say you were a nice guy.
I'm going to come along.
Wait a minute.
We're going to make some money from this interview.
Wait a minute.
Money will be made for both sides.
Wait a minute.
You lover boyed me and you stole the profit.
But just to be clear, I've had no conversation with you about this interview. And the conversations I've had with your intermediary were very professional. And I said, I would like to do an interview with you.
Were you nice?
I'm always nice.
Loverboy. You can't believe you used niceness to loverboy me because this is a profitable enterprise and I was coerced here.
I make no pretense that I've come all the way from London to Romania to interview you because, yes, I want to do it on my show and that will clearly benefit me and my show.
Am I a full-grown consenting adult who decided to do this show?
Yeah, but you're not being coerced into doing this.
Am I a full-grown consenting adult who decided to do this show?
Yes.